Still tuned in to News and Views right here on your home of humanitarian journalism, Salam Media. And this morning, we bring you a voice from the heart of one of the darkest humanitarian tragedies. Not a politician, not a pundit, not an expert, not an analyst, but a doctor, a healer, a witness to a genocide. Doctor Mohammed Mustafa is an emergency doctor based in Australia, and he recently returned from the besieged Gaza Strip, where he volunteered at Nasser and European hospitals in Khan Yunis during some of the most horrific months of this genocide, from treating dying children without basic tools of medicine to watching young lives fade out on hospital floors. Dr. Mustafa saw not only the physical destruction, but the spiritual devastation of a people punished simply for existing. In Gaza, he didn't just treat wounds, he bore witness to war crimes. He stood at times helpless as children died from starvation and disease. But he held hope in one hand and death in the other. And today we speak to Dr. Mustafa not just about what he saw, but about the world refusing to see the true and lived realities of the people of Palestine and the people of Gaza. And I think his testimony is very, very important. And it's one that we all need to hear and feel. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really a pleasure having you join us this morning. And I'm sure this is a conversation that the whole of South Africa is going to be listening to very, very keenly because of just how close Palestine is to the hearts of the people in this part of the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Where do I begin? Let me just start off by saying that the amount of South Africa flags that I saw in Gaza and the amount of Nelson Mandela memorials was absolutely unbelievable. The love that the people in Gaza have for South Africa is unbelievable. At times you felt like you were in South Africa, not in Gaza, just with the admiration that people had. And I think there's a lot of appreciation for South Africa and what they're doing at the ICJ. Sometimes people are saying, people were saying to me over there that they feel like that the South Africans are doing more for them than all of the Arab world are put together. So I think, it's very important that I at least say that, especially on this show, to a South African audience, that their efforts have been appreciated over there in Gaza. With regards to me, it was my second mission to Gaza. I went in June last year during the height of the war, and that's where I served in Nasser Hospital and the European. This time round, I went to the north and I served at the Baptist Hospital, the one that just got bombed a few days ago. And I worked at Al-Aqsa Hospital, which is in Deir el-Balah, the humanitarian zone. So, when we arrived in Gaza, I arrived on the 11th of March. I arrived when there was a ceasefire. But when we were at the Baptist Hospital, I'd just finished a very long shift and I went to bed at about 11 p.m. And I literally was just about finishing, sending messages to my mum, my parents, just letting everyone know I was safe. And when I went to sleep at about 1:30 a.m., the bombs started raining down all over Gaza. And just to put in perspective to you how devastating that night was, more children died in that first 1.5 hours, first 90 minutes, than have died in the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict in 3 years. That's how severe and intense the bombing was. And when the bombing started, my window flew open and I was thrown off my bed just with the intensity of the bombing so close to the hospital. And instantly we knew something was going on because, we'd arrived during a ceasefire and now the room was shaking, the windows were blown off their hinges, and we were thinking to ourselves, what is going on here? So I grabbed my doctor bag and ran down to the emergency department in literally my pajamas, my stethoscope and my doctor bag. And, what we saw was unimaginable. There was hundreds of patients everywhere. There was dozens of killed people. In the end, I think we had a total of 156 dead that night at just our hospital alone. And most of them were women and children. And there was just not even enough room for the patients because the Baptist hospital, which just got bombed, the emergency department that caters to around 1 million people, is 15 meters long and 5 meters wide. That's it.
Mm,
That's all we have,
mm,
right? And we're dealing with mass casualty events every day. And the CT scanner is located about 100, 150, 200 meters away from the emergency room, and it's in another building, and you have to take the patients from the emergency department to get to the CT scanner. But there's, the beds there are broken beds. There's no mattresses on the beds on some of those beds. So we're just trying to transport patients to and from the CT scanner to scan them after we stabilize them. And what ended up happening was I ended up carrying patients on my shoulders,
mm.
and carrying them in my arms like this and one on my shoulder. And I was carrying sometimes 2 to 3 patients. And sometimes I was just carrying a whole bunch of kids at the same time, like 3 little, infants, and just running to the CT scanner and getting them scanned and trying to find out, what kind of injuries they had, and what kind of treatment that we were able to give them. There were many people that died on the way to that CT scanner. There were many people that died on the streets outside the hospital because we just didn't even have enough room in the emergency room. And because of the ceasefire, the way that the ceasefire broke, we, we were very short staffed. We only had 3 doctors on that night, and we had the foreign doctors staying in the rooms at the hospital. So when the bombing started, us as the foreign doctors, we came to assist those 3 doctors. And in the end, we had something like, 8 doctors and about 1,000 patients. And it was a very, very difficult night because they were extremely difficult wounds to deal with. We saw children that had 60 to 80% body burns. We saw children with missing heads. We saw people with missing limbs. It was just a very, very difficult night. And there was a lot of people that died.
Sure.
And yeah,
Yeah, I think, just listening to you speak, it's like narrating a movie, it's like playing out in my head, and I can only imagine what was it like for you being there at that moment as it was happening. But I want to bring, this conversation a bit back. I want to track back to um how did you even come to the decision, to make your way to Gaza, at a time where a lot of foreigners were trying to get out? It was clear
yeah,
that this was no longer a safe space for anyone. It
yeah,
didn't matter where you were from, how you were dressed, whether you're a doctor or you're a journalist. It was just not an ideal place to be,
mm.
for anyone at all. That conscious decision to say, you know what, I'm going to make my way to Gaza, how did it come about? And was it what you expected? Because I think we've all seen the images, before this, whether it's a real ceasefire, there's a conversation for another day, whether or not there was a ceasefire. But was it what you expected? Did the images on our phones and on Al Jazeera and all over the news kind of, you know, do justice to the true lived reality of what Gaza was like?
It really doesn't, to be honest with you. You know, there's a difference when you see a burnt body on TV
Mm,
and when you see and smell a burnt body. There's a difference when you see the inside of someone's brain, that's melted from the intensity of the bombing. There is a difference when you hear the screams of the mother when she grabs onto you and says, "Please save my child's life," and you can't do anything about it. It makes it very, very real. And also, as well, when you see the images on TV and they say that this kid is the only survivor and there's 27 dead, I see those 27 dead, and I see that child and how he has to look and identify the bodies of his family, and he's the only survivor.
mm,
And we have to look after that child after that event, and you have to sit with him. You have to see his expression of joy fade away from his face, and it's very, very difficult to process, some of those things. Eh, I was prepared because I'd been to Gaza before during the war, so I kind of knew what I was expecting. But this time round was very, very different, because this time round it felt like the gloves were off,
mm,
and it felt like there was no rules. We, there were some days where we actually had no work. And the reason why we had no work wasn't because there was no bombing, was because everybody that arrived to the emergency department was dead. There was no survivors. There wasn't even any people with any injuries that you could salvage. Everybody that arrived, some days were just dead. This was the intensity of the bombing. This is how big the bombs were. I'm sure you've seen some of the images of people flying hundreds of meters in the air when the bombs go off. I don't know if you've seen those images, but we've never seen that at any point during the war. And, when we were there staying at the safe house in Deir el-Belah, the rooms were shaking and the windows were shaking from the explosions in Rafah. We could feel the explosions in Deir el-Belah, which is, 10, 15 kilometers away. Now that just shows you the intensity of the bombing and the kind of bombs that were being used. There were nothing like the bombs that I had seen or heard in June. And when the bombings went off and they were only hundreds of meters away from you, it caused a lot of panic to everybody. The hospital was bombed when we were in it. There was 20 people that died on the hospital grounds. There was UN safe houses that were bombed when we were there. There was the paramedics that were shot and killed and buried. So all of this was going on around us, and we were essentially told that there is nowhere safe right now in Gaza for any of you. And we were seeing a lot on social media, especially Israeli social media, of threats to bomb the hospital. So even in the hospital, we just didn't feel safe. The safe zones that we were in when we got evacuated from the north to the south was still getting bombed, and there was lots of casualties from the south, from the safe zone. So no matter where we went, there was danger everywhere you went, and it was extremely difficult. And to prepare yourself to go into something like this, you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. I had packed up all of my stuff and put it in a storage unit. I'd given my car keys to my friend and told him who to give it to if anything did happen. I had, sent my passwords and my emails and stuff like that to close friends to monitor while I was there and if anything happened. And I'd given access to my bank accounts to different people just in case. I mean, that's just what you have to do when you go into somewhere like Gaza. You have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. And it's not easy, doing these things, because your friends will be like, oh, don't be silly, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. And, they're saying that to reassure themselves, but, they haven't been on the ground. They don't know what it's like, and it's definitely not going to be fine. There's a lot of those aid workers that I went in with, some of them didn't come out. So, yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted to go in. And, it's not me trying to pat myself on the back. That's just the reality of it. When I was swarmed at the airport when I came back, I don't know if you saw the images, but there was a lot of people, hugging me and saying that you're a hero and this, that, and the other. And I keep telling people the same thing over and over again. I'm not the hero here. The hero is those people in Gaza. The paramedics in Gaza. I can't believe their level of bravery. And the civil defense, they run when a bombing happens. They run even when the bombs are still going off. They run into these buildings with drones overhead and F-16s overhead, still bombing the area, trying to pull people out from the rubble. That's a hero. When you drive your ambulances close to tanks to go rescue injured people, those are heroes. I'm just doing my job. I'm just there as a human, trying to do my job, trying to at least one day be able to save face. When I look at my kids in the eye and tell them that, yeah, when this genocide happened, your father did try and do something and he did try and help. So, that was my thought of why I wanted to help and why I wanted to be there for those people in Gaza.
This is Salam Media.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Dad, these Frymax chips are so tasty.
Wow, that really takes me back. My dad bought me a Frymax chips every day after school. They were my favorite when I was your age as well. Quality is at the very heart of what we do, and that's why we ensure that every Frymax packet is filled with the beautiful goodness and flavor-packed taste that you've come to expect from us since 1982. Frymax, from generation to generation.
Yasin Badat Financial Advisory. Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yasin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasin Badat Financial Advisory at +27 33346 2071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
There's a short clip that we want to play, and maybe we can just chat on it afterwards. But yeah, I think you paint a grim picture, and it's so eye-opening and insightful talking to someone that's been on the ground and had witnessed this firsthand. But I want us to look at this video and maybe just chat about this moment when you were coming back home and you could see, as you mentioned, everyone so emotional, giving you those round of applause, and what this moment in particular felt like.
Aid workers were there. Our lives were in danger while we were in Gaza, and I'm asking our Prime Minister and Penny Wong to help us, to help the children in Gaza. 2 weeks ago, 1 year ago, we had an Australian aid worker who was killed in Gaza. Our blood is not cheap. We demand that our Prime Minister and Penny Wong help us in order to help those children in Gaza who are dying every single day. The hospital that I worked in was bombed 3 days ago. There are now 1 million people in Gaza with no access to a hospital. There are Look, we all can only do what we can do. I'm able to go to Gaza and help, but you guys are able to raise your voices, you're able to fundraise, and it's not a one-man job. Every single one of us has a mission and has a task. Those children are relying on us, and every single day in this blockade, more children are dying from starvation, more people are dying from lack of medical equipment, and I'm asking every single Australian out there to raise your voices to try and stop this genocide that's going on right now in Gaza.
Palestine! Palestine! Palestine!
I think, just looking at that video, the moment that, you walked out, off the airport, you look so emotional. You look like a man that has come from seeing some really, really horrific things and couldn't wait to be with their loved ones. Just take us through that moment and what was going through your mind and why you appeared to be so emotional.
Part of it was guilt, coming back home to safety, to food, to water, to comfort. I felt guilty. And when there was that round of applause, I felt like I didn't deserve that round of applause. Felt like there were other people more deserving than me. I also felt overwhelmed with the amount of support for Palestine. When you're there, the Wi-Fi is really terrible and you're so preoccupied with work, you don't pay attention to the rest of the world. You don't know what's going on around you. You don't know what's happening. And I just didn't expect so many people from so many different walks of life to be there to support somebody like me, who was just trying to do their job. We had senators there, we had MPs there, we had mothers there and families, we had doctors, we had nurses there, we had accountants there, we had people from all walks of life, from every race, every religion. People were there just to greet me, and that was overwhelming because I grew up a refugee, and I grew up in a world where there was a lot of racism, and where I had faced a lot of bullying when I was growing up, and then just to see that level of support and admiration, it was over. There was a lot of feelings all mixed into one. I didn't really know how to take it all in.
I want to, just go back to your time in Gaza because, as we're speaking, it almost feels like when people talk about the doctors and the journalists and the paramedics that are working in Gaza, we kind of isolate them from the lived reality. So if there's a blockade, if there's no water, there's no any kind of aid coming in, there's no food, there's complete bombardment, we think, well, these people are not affected, only the ordinary citizens are affected. How did you survive in that state, being a Palestinian at that time, because you were essentially one of them at that moment? You were witnessing the casualty events. You mentioned playgrounds hit by drones and children dying without proper care. How do you survive first as a human being, and then again being able to function as a doctor in that kind of chaos?
So it's interesting that you say that because when I was there the first time round, hepatitis A was so common. So most of the doctors that I worked with were, had yellow eyes and yellow tinge to their skin. I'd say about 70% of them were jaundiced because of dirty drinking water. There was the charge nurse, which was the head nurse in the ER. I remember when we were dealing with a mass casualty event and I was trying to intubate a patient on the floor, and I asked him to hand me the tube, the ETT tube, and he couldn't bend over. And I remember saying to him, "What's wrong?" And he said that his whole thigh is filled with shrapnel, and that shrapnel has been there for about 3-4 months. And his house was bombed, he lost his whole family, and here he was with shrapnel in his legs, still working 24-hour shifts, and struggling even to mobilize, but still working, still going. That's what I mean about these people in Gaza. they're superhuman. You know, they're able to endure so much. Like, you can come and work a 24-hour shift, still be compassionate and caring after you've lost your whole family and you're injured yourself. You know, when you're a doctor in Gaza, it's it's a privilege, you know, to work alongside all these doctors and nurses. You learn so much from them. You know, they know how to do medicine in a war zone, and they've been doing it for 2 years, not a few weeks, not one incident, not two incidences. You know, they've been doing this for years, and obviously before this war, there was plenty of wars in Gaza before. So they're like they're very, very well trained in how to deal with mass casualty events. Even though there's no real system, there's no triaging or anything, people just come and they just get on with it. They're very good at what they do. And, you know, I'm just there to support them. I'm there to help them as much as I can. I'm there to encourage them. I'm there to show them that the world hasn't forgotten about them. And that's what they kind of feel, you know. So, because obviously, you know, a lot of them don't have money or anything like that. And, you know, as a foreign doctor, you have a little bit of money. So, you know, I usually make sure that I buy everyone, you know, coffee, or I get everyone some biscuits or some chocolate from the markets, and, you know, make sure that the shift, you know, there's some pleasantries in the shifts, and there's some ways that we can break the tension. You know, after a mass casualty event has happened, we all can sit down, have a cup of tea, and we can have a laugh together, and things like that. And, you know, those are some of the greatest memories I'll ever have in my life, is just, you know, just some doctors just, you know, sitting down, having some tea, eating some biscuits, having a joke and a laugh. And, you know, we'll sit there and we'll joke about the type of biscuits that we're eating, and, you know, we'll you know, when someone brings out you know, some biscuits that they saved from, you know, before the blockade, you know, everyone will like laugh and joke. And, you know, it's just things like that where, you know, they just take so much pleasure in the simple things in life, that really, you know, grounds you as a human being, and it really makes you reevaluate your life and the things that you prioritize. Because for them, just something as simple as having just some sugar with some tea. I remember because there was a lack of sugar, and I remember one of the doctors pulled out this like tiny cup of sugar, and he was like, "Oh, I was going to save this for the anniversary with the missus, this bit of sugar." But he was like, but you know, we've got guests here from Australia and America. They deserve it. And, you know, he pulled out the little sugar that he had, you know, the little jar of sugar that he had, and he put, and, you know, he put sugar in all our teas. You know, it's just little things like that that, you know, it really humbles you as a human being. And those experiences are the things that I take. Those are things that I find great pleasure in, and moments of joy in. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. They're very hopeful people. You know, they're very resilient people. But like I said, you know, some of the things that we witnessed, some of the children that we saw, it's hard. It's hard even to recall and think about. You know, that child that you're showing the picture of, the one that I'm suturing up, you know, he was pulled from under the rubble, and this woman found him, and, you know, she was a stranger essentially, and she walked 4 kilometers with this child to the hospital barefoot to get him to hospital. When he arrived, he had a broken jaw, he had an open wound on his head, and he was obviously he was in shock, he was dehydrated, and we had no maxillofacial surgeons to fix his jaw, and he couldn't really drink any water because it would be going in the wrong way. It was a broken jaw, he was struggling to drink. So, you know, I had to, you know, double up as a surgeon and clean his wounds and suture him up, and at least get him stabilized and get, you know, his sugar levels up, and get him hydrated enough so he was strong enough to be able to go into surgery when we eventually did get a maxillofacial surgeon. So, you know, there's just, and I remember, you know, we were like, where's his family? There's nobody there. And I was, you know, babysitting this child. After I'd sutured him up, I was feeding him a bottle, and there was no diapers or anything like that. So, you know, I'd wrap him up in those silver foils, those silver like blankets, and, you know, he'd soil himself, and I'd have to change the silver blanket. That's what we had for him. His clothes were just these silver blankets. And then, you know, 6 hours of me holding this kid and walking around with him, all of a sudden, you know, another group of people are brought in from under the rubble. And one of those people is his mother, who's 3 months pregnant, and she's been pulled from under the rubble, and she's got a broken leg. His father was killed, and along with all of his other siblings, but his mother had survived, and she was pregnant. And we managed to reunite them. And the look on her face when she saw her child was a priceless moment, because she thought she lost everybody in that airstrike. So there's moments like that that really hit home, and it makes it worthwhile that you were there. But there are other moments of despair, and it's one of those things where, just as doctors, you just have to learn to live with the things that happen there, and the choices that you made, and which patients to treat and which patients you leave to die on the floor and bleed out, because there's just not enough doctors.
Day by day. This is Salam Media.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists, with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
For the first time, I can dream again.
The Africa Muslims Agency Orphan Hope Program provides the food, clothing, and basic support needed by thousands of children across the world. Every child deserves a chance at a hopeful future.
For 50,000 trans, you can transform our lives with the AMA Orphan Hope Program.
Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Mayer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Mayer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Mayer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Mayer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Mayer. where every detail matters.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
I want to touch on that point, making that conscious decision that, there seems to be a better chance that one patient could survive compared to the next one, and you having to make that decision to let one life go in order to be able to save another one. I'm sure it takes a lot from you psychologically, making that choice, and after the end of your shift having to go back to bed. I mean, how do you even begin to deal with something like that?
I don't think I do, to be honest with you. This happened on the I remember there was one incident which just it's haunted me every single day since it's happened. But it was the first night of the ceasefire broke, and obviously the ER was just flooded with patients, and there was a man whose oxygen levels were dropping, and I did an ultrasound scan on him, and he had a pneumothorax. But obviously, given the shrapnel injury, we assumed that it was probably filled with blood as well. So he had a blood-filled lungs, and he was struggling to breathe. So we didn't have enough time, and we didn't even have enough resources anyway to get him some local anesthetic or get him some sedation. And I ended up stabbing him with a knife in his chest to get the chest tube in. And, blood was pouring out as we were putting the chest tube in. And I got from underneath the bed, someone grabbed my ankle. And I looked down, and it was a woman. I don't know if she was a young teenager, like an older teenager, or a young woman, but she was around that age. And one hand she grabbed my ankle, and the other hand she raised the hand up to me. And yeah, she raised her hand up to me, and she said "Sa'idni," which means help in Arabic. And I said to myself, right, let me just sort this guy out, because we're almost there. His oxygen levels are beginning to rise. He's almost there. Let me just finish. And I managed to get the rest of the chest tube in. I secured it, clamped it, put in the water bottle for the chest tube, and I looked down, and she was still holding my ankle, but she died. She bled out, and she died while she was holding my ankle. And that's been difficult, because
I think you'd have to be, I don't know, I don't think given any kind of superhero, Superman would be able to deal with that kind of situation and get out of it and still be normal. And as I'm listening to you speak, you obviously treated children who are not all dying from bombs, but there were children that you treated who were essentially dying of hunger, of liver failure, and of all kinds of trauma. And these are because of the systematic deprivation that the people of Gaza were subjected to. Take us through that, the impact of the blockade, because sometimes we think the only thing that's killing the people of Gaza is the bombs, and it's the drones, and it's the airstrikes. But there's another side of it, the systematic blockade, where no food is being allowed in, no water is being allowed in, no medical supplies are allowed in to help with, some of the diseases that are being brought about by this genocide. Just give us a bit more insight and light on that.
Yeah, so when people have been malnourished for almost 2 years, their bodies don't cope very well with an injury. It doesn't cope very well with an illness. So let's just put aside even the other things that are not the bombs. But say when somebody does come in and they've got a broken leg from a building collapse on them, because they're malnutritioned, even us trying to fix the leg is a problem, because they just don't have the calories to heal, and the bones don't have the calories or the calcium to fuse. So you have that issue. You know, with people recovering from these injuries, they don't recover because they're so malnutritioned. Then you have kids coming in, and, you know, when you have something like hepatitis A, which is, you know, like a viral illness of the liver, you know, it's a self-limiting illness, or it should be most of the time. And it should be about 6 weeks of, you know, abdominal pain, a bit of nausea, maybe a bit of vomiting, a bit of change in your bowel habits, and general fatigue and viral symptoms. But because they're so weak and malnutritioned, they go into full liver failure. And I remember when I was there the first time round, you know, we saw this girl who'd come in, and I remember her eyes were wide open, and I got a pen torch and I shined it in her eyes, and her pupils were not responding to the light, which is usually an indication that she's brain dead. And, you know, her heart rate was about 150. And I remember we took some blood from her and we sent it to, you know, the blood gas machine all the way in the ICU. That's the only, you know, blood work that we had at the time. And when the blood work came back, her blood pH was like 6.7, which is essentially almost incompatible with life. But I knew that she was already dead because, you know, her eyes were, you know, were fixed and dilated. But, you know, she then went into cardiac arrest, and, you know, we performed CPR on her, and we must have performed CPR for about, you know, 2 hours. And she ended up obviously dying. And her family were just in tears, crying. And then her mother came up to me, grabbed my hands, started kissing my hands, and started saying, "Please, doctor, your hands are blessed. Keep going. I know you can save her. I know you can save her." And in the end, I had to get my ultrasound machine and show her that the heart wasn't moving, and she was dead. And, you know, things like this, like, really bring full circle the devastation that you're dealing with. These aren't just numbers. These are children that have families, that have parents, that all care about them, and all of them are devastated. So when one child is lost, you know, for half a dozen people, that's their whole world. That's gone, you know. And, you know, that's the real cost of this war, is all those children and those families that have been destroyed.
What would you say is the one moment that will stay with you forever, from your time in Gaza? One moment that will never leave you, no matter what happens, you know, no matter the amount of therapy that you might seek, or and no matter how many times you might revisit Gaza, that one moment, that's Teflon. It'll essentially just stick with you until forever.
There's a lot of moments, you know, there's a lot of moments. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm telling you a lot of different stories of different things, and I could go on for hours, you know. Every day there's a new story to tell. But, you know, I think one thing that always gets to me is just the bravery of these people. You know, when you see them jumping into the ambulances as soon as they hear an airstrike, and driving towards where the site that was bombed, and sometimes it's not far from the hospital, and you see them running out with their stretcher, running into the line of fire, and you just, you know, you just sit back and you think to yourself, like, man, if this was anywhere else in the world, they wouldn't be doing this. There's something special about these people in Gaza. They are truly heroic, brave. They are resilient. And, you know, whenever I lose hope, they never lose hope. And, you know, it taught me a lot, because I was there for like a month and I was losing hope. These guys are there for 2 years and they're still coming to work with a smile on their face. They're still laughing and joking. You know, those are the things where, you know, you just never forget. Like, I'll never forget, you know, that level of humanity that you'll see in people. It's a very powerful thing, you know, when you see people who aren't scared of death, when you see people who would rather die than not serve their community. You know, to have that level of camaraderie, you never see that anywhere else in the world. To see it with your own eyes, to witness it, that's just something that I think will always, that's changed me as a person. It's changed my perspective on how I see things and how I view things. And, you know, hats off to those people in Gaza, and hats off to the Palestinians. They truly are a special group of people.
No, definitely. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Doc, thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you so much for your insights. I think it's always important to talk to people that have been inside of Gaza and can narrate, the way that you have so vividly about what's really happening in that part of the world, and just, reiterating the point that this is a genocide. It's not just a slogan that people are just shouting because it's cool to do so, because we think, it makes us cut above from the rest, but it's essentially that. It's an ethnic cleansing. People are being killed in their numbers. And really appreciate your efforts, and hope we chat again soon, because I feel there's so much more that we can still uncover that the world needs to know about. But we're going to leave it here for now. Thank you so much, and really appreciate you.
Thank you. Salam alaikum.
Walaikum salam. That was Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, and very, very graphic. I think in the face of unthinkable horror, Dr. Mustafa stood not only as a doctor, not only as a physician, but as an important witness to a genocide. How many people can say that? That I bear witness to a genocide. He bears the truth of what we all know. He's the voice of those being buried under the rubble in grief, and his testimony is not just a recounting of tragedy. I think you can hear it in his voice, but it's almost a call to conscience, for all of us, to say, how are we letting this continue? How's humanity allowing this to happen in what's essentially the future? The year is 2025. Speaking of the fifth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence, but you have people being slaughtered. You have people being buried alive. We cannot see, we cannot unsee what he has described. We cannot unknow what we know now. The smothered cries of Gaza's children, the desperation of his doctors, the quiet resistance of a mother who dares to say, show the world this. Imagine at that vulnerable moment, a mother saying, this is the decapitated body of my child, and show the world, record. These are not just stories. They are a demand from the people of Gaza to humanity for justice and for action. So again, we reiterate to the people of Gaza, you're not alone. And to those of us who are listening, we must not remain silent. And to people like Dr. Mustafa and the thousands of other emergency medical workers who are still in Gaza, we thank you. We thank you for your courage. We thank you for your compassion and for speaking truth in a world too comfortable with silence, and a world that's becoming too comfortable with death. We're going to take a quick break. News and Views continues after this.